So welcome back to Thrive, your agency resource. If you've been a little unsure as to what conscious leadership is, what it's all about, and why it's needed today more than ever, you're really going to love today's conversation, probably as much as I will. My guest is Debra Sunderland. She's the founder and lead coach at Sunderland Coaching. She's also represented by my other business, Consciousness Leaders. So definitely check her out there. Debra, welcome to the show. I am so excited and have been so really looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Thank you, Kelly. Me too. Let's do it.
So the funny backstory or serendipitous backstory is that the way that we kind of found each other, or the way that I found you, I guess I should say, I ran a Google search because I was curious one day, what comes up on Google when you search, what is conscious leadership? And so out of that curiosity, up comes on position 0, Debra's website. What is conscious leadership? And it was a really great definition. And then I started clicking through. I found and learned a little bit more about Debra. And as I'm reading her story, I was like, my mouth kind of like hung open. I got chills and I was like, wow, we have such a similar upbringing, such a similar path, a similar journey. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that? I feel like I definitely felt such an instant connection before we even, met for the first time on Zoom. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to have you share that.
I have chills right now as well. I remember that moment and my mouth dropped when you started to share your story. And for me, it was having parents who didn't take good care of me. That how a child would like to be treated, taken care of. And my mom was ill and continues to not take good care of herself. And it came out towards me and my brother. So I ended up being the one who protected both of us. And crazy stories like my mom taking us to go shopping and she would steal everything and we'd go, not everything, but whatever she wanted. And then we would go be taken off to the police station. And then the students at school that I went to school with would know about it, or my parents would be fighting and the police would come to mitigate and take care of us, or we would go running out of the house at night to be safe from my mom and dad trying to kill each other with knives. So it was like living in a war zone pretty much every day. And I never knew what was going to happen. And I realized that it was so for me. I realized that I had to become ultra sensitive to my wisdom of my intuition, my feelings, be one step ahead. It helped me be safe. It helped me achieve. It brought me to being the winner, seeking acceptance from the outside of my life. And it's so for me because I really learned to love my parents, that they're just doing the best they really could. And I believe we all are. We're really just really trying to do the best we can. And the best thing I can do is love them and love myself and keep loving myself. And that's what I've been learning through that whole journey.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting. So one of the things that I just want to kind of put a pin in is this idea that, listen, none of us had a perfect childhood. Some of us just had a little bit more of a difficult time than others, right? And I know that that's a very light and blanket statement, but the reality is none of us escaped that childhood unscathed, right? There was either neglect or abuse or this or that. And unfortunately, that's normal, right? Like that's in some way how we learn, how we develop coping mechanisms, all these different things. But something that you said was that you sought externally, right? So this idea that I need to validate my sense of self from the external versus having that self-validation or that inner validation. I think that's really important because I don't think a lot of people, even if you're pretty self-aware, I don't think a lot of people really think about that and realize that how that comes out and how that shows up in the way that we talk or think or behave, right? So Can you talk a little bit more about that, that validation sense and like how that shows up for leaders?
Yeah, so I love that. So for those of you who are Enneagram trained or know about that, I'm just going to mention that I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which means I'm a winner, I'm an achiever, I'm not going to fail. And many leaders, many CEOs are in that type. They're going to win. They want their team to win.
Is that like a
And
2 or a 3?
it's a 3. Threes and 8s typically are leaders of companies, not always, but typically, and 8s are the active controller, they're called. So the reason I mention that is we have all learned, we've been taught since we've been going to school, maybe even by our parents, to be winners, to be achievers, to get that A, to reach something in order to get to the next level, to graduate from high school, to go on to college, to get to the company you want. And we're always looking outside for that. And then we have this temporary hit of, oh, I made it. Oh, I made it. Oh, I made it. And there's this angst typically that is driving, and it's never enough. And I felt that insatiable. And I felt that as a child, I had this pit in my stomach. I was first chair violinist. I was the best track runner, whatever it was. But there was this thing inside of me that would never let up, because I was looking out here. And I've noticed with leaders, when I really get to know them, and I'm talking about multi-billion-dollar company leaders all the way down to startups, they'll have the same want. It's, can I be accepted? Am I enough? And do I have enough? And the ones who really strive to have enough and be enough on the outside usually are the ones who are seeking that approval, like myself. And until I learned that it won't be enough and it has to be me that is enough, and believe that, feel my feelings, accept myself, learn, and that we're all reactive, all of us. Like, even when I think about my parents just now, as you talked about that, everyone has a reactivity, right? No matter what it is, we all have a reactive mind to keep us safe. Well, they're just being reactive. It's no different. They just maybe did extreme things, but they're just being reactive. And that's how we all are. And looking outside of ourselves is a reactive phase. It is a, can I be safe out here if someone measures me or deems me as being the gold star, and you can move to the next level. And so letting go of that and really doing the inner work of, how am I enough? And do I have enough right here, right now? The presence of that, being in the present moment, is what really changed me, and the work that I do with people right now.
Yeah. So how does that translate, right? So we're talking about like self-awareness and deep personal work and all of that kind of development, right? How does that translate into conscious leadership? And maybe also why more people are even waking up to conscious leadership right now.
Yeah, thank you. So conscious leadership is about being present. It is about being very aware, conscious, the opposite of being in a coma, which I very well know that I was put in a coma because I had a brain injury, and I woke up to consciousness, being aware of my feelings, being aware of my body intelligence, being aware of my thinking. What am I telling myself? Instead of just floating along and being at the effect or reactive to my behaviors that I've lived pretty much my whole life. So I believe now, which I love, seeing the growth of consciousness around even the younger generation. My story, my belief, my experience is that I'm going to say 40 and younger have seen and experienced people my age and older suffering. They see us trying to get there, and there's an energy around that, and it's kind of icky, and they can feel it. It's not that they don't care for those people, but they're like, I don't know what that is over there,
but I don't want
it. And I want to do things differently. And so they come up with this word purpose, right? But I think that's even been kind of like, I don't know, diluted, where people think it's about, I'm going to serve a company or underprivileged or whatever it is for once a month. But that's not what these younger people are saying. They're saying, I want to live who I'm called to be. And so I see that yearning inside of them, really, that they're really searching for, how can I have that? Who am I? Because I'm being told one thing over here at school, like, this is what I got to do to be here, but yet it doesn't really align with me. And so when I do work with Vanderbilt and Belmont University here, and when I talk with these younger people, they're so curious. And so consciousness to me is, can I get curious as to what's here right now? and what can I learn right now versus just being reactive. And when we're conscious, we want to look at the results. If we're not getting the results we want, especially now, people are more fearful than ever. People are overwhelmed. People don't have clarity. They've never had to navigate a situation like we've all been in. How do we do this? Be on Zoom, not be on Zoom, be together or not be together. And now we're getting a different round of the variant. So when people try to figure out what to do, out of a reactivity, we will never get the result we want. So seeing how people can step back, take a deep breath and look at like, how could this be for us? Just like our childhood for me and you wasn't for us, or it was for us in the time it wasn't, and we don't believe COVID's really for us, but really I want to encourage people, like, how is it really for us to slow down and look at what hasn't been working, even though we've been a hugely successful nation, and how do we shift around being who we want to become and become with each other versus what we accomplish.
Right. Let's face it, agency life looks very different than ever before. Remote and hybrid teams need better tools to help them communicate and access files, track their time, manage client budgets, and more. If you believe that it's time to streamline things once and for all, Workamajig is the all-in-one agency management platform built to help you do just that. Head over to workamajig.com/thrive to learn more. Back to the show. So it sounds to me that, it's kind of like conscious leadership and the idea that people are waking up to this now. It's like, for some people, the way that we've historically been going has worked, but that some people is a very small percentage, right? It's not you or I, it's not most people, it's a small percentage. So what that actually indicates is that the way that we have been operating as individuals and as organizations is not sustainable, right? So if we boil it down, conscious leadership is about trying to create sustainability within the self and the organization, right? Like that's probably, if we boil it all down, that's what we're after. And, some people talk about it in the context of, valuing the people, the humans in the organization, valuing the planet, any kind of impact from that standpoint, right? And profit, not profit over those things, profit as part of those things. If it was sort of like a little Venn diagram, maybe profit might even be the bottom circle, right? But somewhere in the middle where there's the overlap is something called sustainability, right? And so, I think that people are realizing that it's just, we can't keep going like this, right? And you mentioned that it's more people, younger generation, like 40 and under, right? I'm right at that cusp. But I also notice in my coaching work that it is people who are actually a little older than that are also starting to wake up, because they're in a little bit of a different mindset. They're not looking at the folks older than them and saying like, oh, I don't want to continue to do that. They're actually having some kind of experience themselves where they're starting to do what you said, which is dial up that curiosity. Why don't I feel happy? Why do I feel like I'm not sure if I am doing this right? I thought it was going to be more beautiful than this. I thought I was going to be happier than this, right? So they're starting to ask those questions. Just curious what you think about.
There definitely are some of those for sure. I see that my experience has been, they're still attached. They might be curious, but it's really hard to let go. If you're making billions or millions, it's really hard to let go of trying maybe the opposite even of thinking and feeling and doing. But yes, I agree. And I love that you brought that up, because I think you all know about consciousness. So when we're not conscious, we're living in fear. We're living in toxic fear. We're living at, oh my gosh, be careful, watch out. That might be wrong. You're wrong, or I'm wrong. And so we will never create a result we want from that space. And so I think some of these older people are looking at like, my back hurts, my body hurts now, I just had a heart attack and I'm 50 years old, or and they're starting to realize that they've been storing a lot in their bodies even, and that's taking a toll on them. And there's always this little niggle in them looking for some sort of fulfillment. And I've actually coined a word. I don't know if we talked about this when we met last time, but it's called geniusship. So my work is to move us from excellence, which I believe is killing us, to consciousness, to waking up to we're more than achieving and winning, to our genius, that we all have this purpose, calling, skill, talent, all lined up beautifully because we're all unique like no one else. And if we are put into that, if we create that for ourselves and our people, whoa, the sky is the limit. And talk about creating something greater than we could just by trying to achieve something.
Right.
Talk about sustainability and engagement, right? So
Right.
that's my desire, is that we start to really wake people up to consciousness, taking radical responsibility for how I think, feel, respond, or react. We're going to react. How do I like continue to move through that to responsiveness? And then can I start to wonder, what am I doing here? Like, what's my purpose? It's got to
Right.
be more than achieving.
Right.
And I do see people asking and looking for that.
I love this idea that excellence is killing us. Did you write this book yet? That's the title of the book.
That is the book. Actually, I'm going on sabbatical in September and I'm going to be working on it.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but hopefully
Yes.
that is the title, because I would definitely.
That is totally the title. It's called Your Excellence is Killing You.
Oh my God. That's really interesting. I really didn't know that. Yeah, because that, for someone who identifies or has previously identified, to be clear, as a total perfectionist, total type A, everything that you've said, it was like and I know so many people listening and watching can identify with this, right? You are the leader or potentially the owner or both of an agency or some type of marketing, creative, technology firm, right? And so have you ever stopped to wonder, what is it that's actually driving all of that? For me, I can only speak for myself, but for me, I have come to realize that it was my need to prove to myself and to the world that I was valuable and worthy. Right? I needed that affirmation. So my drive, like you talked a little bit about that thing underneath, right? My drive was to prove worthiness because I didn't get it as a child. Right? Yeah. I wasn't taught that I was worthy for just simply who I was. For me, it was like, if you get the straight A, if you are captain of the sports team, if, right? If you do all these things, conditional love, then I might love you. In my case, it was like, you could do all those things, I'm still not going to do it, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, no, I know that one too.
Yeah. But this is the thing, right? Like we are inadvertently taught, and it's not our parents' faults, right? No. Like that's probably what they were taught.
Exactly.
Right? It just is. And so, but it is a good question. Like, what is the driver behind you owning an agency or taking the initiative to start something, to start as a practitioner and say, yeah, I could do this. I could prove to everyone, really to myself, but prove to everyone that I can do this, and I'll get that external validation, back to what we were talking about before.
Totally. So a 3, what you just said, that's what a 3 is. They're seeking their worthiness from outside of themselves, and they're afraid that they're not valuable.
Yeah. I'm afraid.
And it's really interesting because I find the same thing, like, is to know your motivation. And for those of you, I'm just going to make a plug for the Enneagram and to get it assessed appropriately, because it really is a great tool to notice through that, what is your motivation? It does really highlight your motivation and how to stretch and grow out of that. I call my 3 is my delusion to safety, and my delusion to enoughness.
I love that.
It's my delusion, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's an awesome reframe. I love that, because it also takes the attachment to it as like a crutch. Like, oh, well, that's just how I am. It's like, well, no, that's actually, I'm calling myself out. That's my delusion. And now I'm like, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, totally.
So Debra, as we start to wrap up, you mentioned Enneagram as one tool, but I'm sure that there are a couple more in your repertoire that you use probably on a daily basis. So any that you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So for sure, you all, when we are triggered, we don't breathe fully. Our muscular system tightens, it pulls in to protect our body, and we only breathe a very short amount. And from that space, we're not able to even think clearly. And then it doesn't feel good in our body. So I have learned the major thing that has changed my body and my whole being is learning breathing practices. And just one simple thing that I do is breathe through my belly as deep as I can, slow as I can, in the midst of me being triggered, and just feeling the rise and expansion of my belly all the way up through my chest, through my nose, as slowly as I can, and then even slower exhale all the way out. And I do that 3 or 4 times, and I practice that even when I'm not triggered, because then I remember, oh yeah, come back to your breath, come back to your breath. So that actually does change your nervous system and actually the chemistry in your blood when we breathe. The other thing I do is once I've felt my feelings through and I'm clear-minded, I ask myself, wow, that thought I had, that really got me going. Could the opposite of that thought be true or even truer than what I was telling myself? And that's neuroplasticity, really, is starting to think of another way. And whoa, it brings you to curiosity, because when we're triggered, we're not curious, we're just right. And it then brings me to a state of peace and calm, right? Just asking the opposite. Calm slows me down.
Do you have a specific example in, let's say, the last couple of weeks where you used one of these tools and it like totally changed your emotional regulation or nervous system or something along those lines that allowed you to kind of come back to center?
Well, I've really been triggered. We talked about this earlier around COVID. I have found that 5 people that I know have COVID, and they all have been vaccinated. And I got angry because I'm like, why are you doing this if people are still getting COVID and they're not wearing masks? And so I had fear, I had anger, I had this, like, what are we going to do now? There's nowhere safe to go. And that I could feel myself spiraling down. I was like, oh, I can't go in here. I'm going to live in my house again. And so even this morning, I could feel a tinge of it. This happened last night. So I said, okay, just breathe. I noticed, and I said out loud, what's here? I said, there's fear here. That's what the main thing. So can you just welcome fear and breathe with it, allow it to be here instead of push it away. And there's anger and frustration here. So can I just welcome that, breathe, and just be with what is, instead of also trying to push away the frustration. And this morning I woke up later and I just kept welcoming myself with my breath, with whatever was there. And I'm a new person for sure. Yeah. I'm able to have like a clear-headed conversation now.
I really appreciate that as the example, because I think a lot of people are definitely dealing with that. I definitely, that resonates a lot with me as well. So it's helpful, and hopefully that, some people can take that away as well, listening to it.
I went and thought I would share. I've had it 3 times. I'm gonna share it with you. This morning it popped up in my my phone. It's the Great Resignation, which I know you know of, and it of these leaders, CEOs who are like, I'm out of here, I'm checking out, this is too much for me, this is not what I want, I don't want this on my plate, I don't have the answers, whatever it is, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And my story that I make up around that is that they're going to think that if they leave, things are going to be okay. And then they're finally going to have whatever it is. And my want for us is for you and me, the people who are conscious supporters of this, is to support them and like, let's take a step back. What if you still are the answer, but we look at it from a different path? We take a breath and take a look at like, how is this situation for you as a leader too? So I just wanted to share that.
I'm really glad that you did. That's a beautiful way to wrap up. Debra, thank you so much for being with me today. I love talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Thanks, Kelly. You too.
This episode has been brought to you by Workamajig, the #1 creative agency management software. Show notes at thrive.workamajig.com. Find out how your creative agency can become more productive and more profitable. Schedule your demo at thrive.workamajig.com.